Hi, my name is Bentley Sparks.
Hi, and I'm Megan Colts.
And welcome to Court Center. In today's program, we're going to be talking about sexual harassment in the school systems.
Great. So let's get started. So let's start off by defining what sexual harassment really is. Basically, it's unwelcome sexual advances, requests for sexual favors, and other verbal or physical contact of sexual nature. Specifically, sexual harassment interferes with an individual's work performance or creates an intimidating, hostile, or offensive work environment.
Great, Megan. Well, why don't you give us some examples of where this might occur?
Okay, well, this could occur
Physical contact, maybe?
Oh, yes, physical contact, like touching or pinching or pushing or kissing or rubbing, interfering with blocking movement. So basically, if I'm in a hallway and my teacher comes up to me and blocks me within a hallway and I can't get by, that can be an example of sexual harassment and where it can interfere. Now, also, there's verbal sexual advances. There's suggestive or obscene letters or emails, notes, for example, repeated face-to-face phone or email invitations after being refused, and derogatory comments.
Okay. Well, I know a few more. Making any kind of sexual gesture or displaying sexually suggestive objects. That could be an example.
Yeah.
Also, verbal abuse of the sexual nature. Graphic comments about an individual's body, degrading words to describe an individual. That could be sexual harassment. Also, unwanted sexual advances or attention. That's another good one. Mm-hmm. Finally, obscene or suggestive gifts or frequent discussion of sexual acts. These are all examples of sexual harassment, especially in the physical education.
Yes. So let's go into the two types of sexual harassments that we do have.
All right. Well, there's the quid pro quo and the hostile environment. Now, the quid pro quo is actually Latin for this for that, and it's kind of self-explanatory. When submission to or rejection of sexual advances or conduct of a sexual nature is used as a basis for employment decisions. So that could be a principal not employing a teacher because the teacher refused to have sex with them. Or it could be the other way around, where a unqualified teacher might get a raise or a promotion because of his sexual or her sexual nature.
And that's never fair.
No,
ever.
Not at all. And then there's also hostile environment. And this is basically when unwelcome sexual conduct unreasonably interferes with an individual job performance, or if it creates a hostile, intimidating, or offensive work environment.
Sure. I can understand both of those. So let's move on to discuss our first landmark case.
All right. Well, great.
All right. Cool.
Well, first we have Davis v. Monroe County Board of Education.
And that's in 1999. All right, guys, we're going to talk about a case, Davis v. Monroe County Board of Education. This happened in 1999. In this case, a male fifth-grade classmate of LaShonda Davis tried to touch her breast and told her, "I want to get in bed with you and I want to feel your breast." She reportedly told this to her mother and teacher, but the school didn't do anything to support LaShonda or punish the perpetrator. This harassment continued: verbal taunts, leers in class, and unwanted behaviors. Another time, he rubbed his body up against LaShonda in the school hallway. LaShonda reported each of these incidents to her teachers, but still had to sit next to the student in class, and nothing was done to get this harassment to stop. The incident stopped 6 months later when her parents decided to charge him with sexual battery. He pledged guilty. During this time, LaShonda's previously high grades had dropped, and her father discovered that she had written a suicide note. LaShonda filed suit in the United States District Court against the board, the school district superintendent, and the principal. The complaint alleged that the persistent sexual advances and harassment by the student, GF, upon LaShonda interfered with her ability to attend school and perform her studies and activities, and that the deliberate indifference by defendants to the unwelcome sexual advances of a student upon LaShonda created an intimidating, hostile, offensive, and abusive school environment in violation of Title IX. The complaint sought compensatory and punitive damages. The defendant asked for summary judgment for failure to state a claim upon which relief could be granted, and the district court granted respondent's motion. Davis appealed the district court's decision dismissing her Title IX claim against the board, and a panel of the Court of Appeals for the 11th Circuit reversed. Title IX encompasses a claim for damages due to a sexual hostile educational environment created by a fellow student or students when the supervising authorities knowingly fail to act to eliminate the harassment. The 11th Circuit panel recognized that Davis sought to state a claim based on school officials' failure to take action to stop the offensive acts of those to whom the officials exercised control, and the court concluded that Davis had alleged facts sufficient to support a claim for hostile environment sexual harassment on this theory.
This is an interesting case, Megan. Why don't you tell us some of the moral obligations for the teacher in this case?
Well, morally, I would think that, first of all, the teacher would, if the teacher had a complaint from LaShonda, I would think that the teacher would move the situation, would interact by not having LaShonda sit next to this boy who is making all of these sexual harassment comments to her. Obviously, I'm surprised that the school didn't interject at some point, because the parents did call the school, and he did call the principal and say, listen, my child is being sexually harassed by this boy. So it's appalling to me that a teacher, obviously the principal would have told the classroom teacher, and for the teacher just to not, for the simple fact, move them apart is beyond me.
Well, and it shows you what can happen if you just kind of brush it under the carpet and act like nothing's going on, because obviously this girl was experiencing some problems with this, and right. I mean, who wouldn't?
I mean, she had suicidal notes.
Exactly.
So and she had to go to treatment afterwards, after this. So it psychologically and mentally damaged her for a long while. She'll never forget this the rest of her life. Exactly.
And it surely, I mean, her grades suffered, so it definitely affected her from there on out, just trying to make up for what she lost.
Exactly.
Well, let's talk about some different things that maybe could be handled differently in this situation. I think, first of all, it's important for the teachers to respond immediately in this situation. I think that as soon as they get a sexual harassment case brought before them, they can notify the parents of the boy who was involved in it and have some sort of punishment, whether it's suspension or even like some sort of class they need to take just to learn about it. So definitely respond immediately. And I also think that you can't rely on other teachers to do something. I think that as a teacher, you need to say, I need to do something about this right now, instead of saying that I'm sure that the principal will do something, or I'm sure someone else will say something.
It needs to start in the classroom. I agree. Great. So, well, some other things that we can talk about is to obviously correct the bad behavior that's going on. We talked about that earlier when I was talking about separating the students. You have to separate those students if they're not getting along, or if there is a problem. As a teacher, you cannot keep those students together.
I agree. All right.
So let me just ask you, what kind of sexual harassment is this?
Well, this is hostile environment, because the girl in this situation, she could not perform her tasks of day-to-day things because of this situation. And she was, I mean, obviously, like you said, the suicide note is just evidence that she was having trouble functioning in her day-to-day life because of this. So definitely hostile environment.
Oh, thank you.
Well, why don't we move on to the next case, and I'll go from here. Thank you, Megan. Now we're going to talk about another case. It's Jane Doe versus the Claiborne County Board of Education. This case happened in 1996, and I'm just going to give a brief summary of what goes on. Jane Doe, who is a freshman girl at Claiborne County High School, decided to be a scorekeeper for the boys' baseball team. She was required to travel on the bus with the team to away games. The coach, Jeffrey Davis, began systematically abusing and harassing Doe during these bus trips. On one bus trip, Davis sat next to Doe and reached inside her blouse and fondled her breasts. Doe was surprised by the incident and avoided Davis for the rest of the year. In the beginning of Doe's sophomore year, Davis started harassing Doe with phone calls. One call, he asked her if she would be the scorekeeper for the next boys' basketball game, and she accepted. during the bus trip, Davis fondled her breasts again. After the incident, Davis continued to harass Doe with phone calls. He called her at home on a regular basis and instructed her to call him only when his wife was away. Things only got worse from here. Davis called Doe on a daily basis. Once, Davis kissed Doe on the mouth in the coach's office at school. Davis then suggested they have sexual intercourse. In the spring of Doe's sophomore year, Davis took her to a trailer that belonged to a friend of his and had sexual intercourse with her. They had sexual intercourse on 5 other occasions. Throughout this period, Davis continued the phone calls and fondling on the bus trips. In the winter of Doe's junior year, 2 of her aunts discovered her in Davis's home while his wife was at the hospital giving birth to their child. Davis was charged with 6 accounts of statutory rape. Doe never told anyone of this relationship. Doe has been in psychological counseling since 1993. So, Doe files a suit in court. Now, in court, Doe sued Claiborne County Board of Education and 10 other defendants. And we're not going to go into who all the defendants were, but she alleged that the defendants had actual notice that Davis had a tendency to be sexually abusive. And when he was a teacher at Midway School, and this is before he was a teacher at Claiborne County, he was accused 4 different times of having sexually abusing
so he already had
students.
A pass.
Right, he already had a pass. But the thing about it is that there were 8 other instances that they were unable to prove. So technically, he has 12 instances where he was abusing female students.
Wow.
But after this situation with the girl here, he was dismissed from the job. Then after that, Claiborne County hired him despite his past. And he was found, even right when they hired him, he was found inappropriate behavior with 2 middle school students.
After he got rehired?
Yes, this is after he got rehired. So it's very complicating.
Sure.
But then on another occasion, the guidance counselor informed the principal that a girl complained that Davis touched her inappropriately and said, "Let's get naked together." So obviously, we have some issues with this man.
I would agree.
But then shortly after that, then he starts harassing Jane Doe. So in court, Doe asserted that their collective failure to remove Davis from student contact and their decision to rehire him was deliberate indifference to Doe's safety and her health and welfare,
sure.
Which definitely, I see that from her standpoint
of course.
Also. And this is in violation of the 14th Amendment of the United States Constitution.
Right.
Also, Doe sued the county and the school board for sexual harassment in violation of Title IX. And now, we've talked about Title IX a lot in class, but we talked about Title IX specifically relating to athletics and
gender
lots about
differences.
Right. But this case, she's saying that Davis was an agent of the school board and his conduct created a hostile sexual environment for Doe and one that she could not feel comfortable participating in.
Right.
So this is what she's alleging.
Okay.
But the defendants, however, they asked for summary judgment, and they're saying that there's not enough proof to say all this. And actually, the district court granted summary judgment. However, the plaintiff did appeal, and the appellate court reversed and remanded the Title IX, saying that it's unquestionable that Doe had a private right of action under Title IX for both injunctive relief and monetary damages. Further, the discrimination prohibition of Title IX encompasses the sexual harassment of the student by a teacher. So Megan, this is kind of, we got a big bite to chew here.
I mean, honestly.
What do you think about all this? I mean, did the school board deserve to get punished the way they did? And how did he get, how did they rehire someone despite the background?
Right, exactly. That's my biggest concern right now is, we have schools out there and they're rehiring people that are committing sexual harassment, getting, committed for sexual harassment charges. It doesn't seem right. So Jane Doe won this case.
She did.
Well, she should have.
Exactly.
I mean, if my teacher is sexually harassing me and I didn't win, I wouldn't feel backed up by my school system, my government, all of my rights, all of my, rights as a person. So.
Well, the thing about this case that gets me the hardest is that, as you recall, he was caught while his wife was giving birth to their child.
Oh my gosh.
And you just wonder what kind of people do we have educating our young children today.
Exactly, and that's what's scary, because sometimes you just don't know the background of that teacher. Obviously, the principal and the superintendent and all them, they're hiring our teachers.
Exactly.
So they should be doing a background check. And obviously, if this man, in this case, has a background of sexual harassment, and all of these cases today are so prudent in, coming up with different, sexual harassment charges, I don't see why we're still hiring these teachers.
Well, and the thing about this situation that I did not mention, but I will mention now, is that after he resigned from the first school because of all the counts of sexual harassment, they had a long investigation trying to figure out what really happened. And he basically covered it all up, and he kind of made side deals with people saying, hey, if you don't release this, then I'll do this thing for you. And it was all, it was all dirty.
Sure.
And for him to get hired, despite the fact that all this, see, the thing is the school board knew about some of these cases. And I think that even if there's one or two instances, I think that's enough to not hire him.
Sure, I agree. I completely agree. Wasn't his license should have been revoked.
Definitely.
In my opinion. He should have never been back. He should have been on a pedophile watch list. He should have never been able to go around schools again. It just doesn't seem right to me. No moral value there, like we discussed earlier. But
I agree.
let's move along here.
All right. Well, I'm actually going to introduce a good friend of mine. Her name is Hannah Hotstuff, and she is going to talk about some statistics referring to sexual harassment.
Thank you, Bentley. I have a report here on some sexual harassment statistics. According to the U.S. Bureau of Justice Statistics, women committed only 3.5% of all single perpetrator sexual assaults or rapes in this country in 2003. The number of female offenders convicted annually has stayed flat for years at about 4% of the number of male offenders. Even in teaching, where women are highly overrepresented, 5 of 7 studies reviewed by the U.S. Department of Education 2 years ago indicated that 80% to 90% of offenders were male. Bentley, back to you guys at the studio. Great. Thanks, Hannah. What a great voice you have.
All right. Now, we're going to start discussing some different circumstances where sexual harassment can occur.
Okay.
The first one I want to talk about is the victim, as well as a harasser, may be a woman or a man. And this means that it can be a man harassing another man, a female harassing another female, or a female harassing a man, or a man harassing a female. So any of those possibilities. The most common one, obviously, is a male harassing a female, but that doesn't
That's what we hear about
have to
most.
be. Exactly. Also, and as I just said, the victim does not have to be of the opposite sex, and
Sure.
there are many, many cases about that. And then finally, the harasser could be the victim's supervisor, an agent of the employer, or a supervisor in another area, or even a coworker or a non-employee. So it doesn't really matter who the harasser or the victim is. As long as it's occurring, then it can be considered sexual harassment.
Right. Another extremely important one is, the victim does not have to be the person harassed necessarily, but can also be anyone affected by the conduct or the content of the harassment. So, for example, I am sitting at my desk, and another person is being harassed next to me. Now, I hear this harassment and I'm offended. So that is somewhat of an example of how I can be offended by that comment. Also, obviously, the harasser's comment must be unwelcome.
Well, and if there's a boyfriend and a girlfriend or a husband or a wife, and they can say whatever they want to.
Exactly.
As long as one of them is not uncomfortable with the situation, then that's not considered harassment.
Right. So, well, you know what? Let's introduce our great friend, Katie Couric, okay? She's going to present us with more information on sexual harassment and how it is in the schools.
Katie?
A new study on teens and sexual harassment should give every parent pause. Most teenage girls report they've been sexually harassed at school, on the playing field, or at home. In a study that appeared in the journal Child Development, 90% of teen girls say they've been harassed at least once. More than half say they've experienced it in the classroom during typically male-dominated subjects like math and science. What's perhaps most troubling about this study is who is reportedly doing the harassing. While 1 in 4 girls surveyed said it was male friends or brothers, nearly as many said it was their own coaches or teachers, the very people who should inspire and encourage them. Attitudes are passed down from generation to generation. The people our kids look up to need to get with the program and stop the cycle of harassment and abuse. That's a page from my notebook. I'm Katie Couric, CBS News.
Katie, I couldn't have said it better myself. Now, let's get back to our last case discussion on Gebser v. Lago. All right, now we're going to talk about another case, Gebser v. Lago, which happened in 1998. In the spring of 1998, Alita Starr Gebser was an 8th grade student at a middle school in the Lago Vista Independent School District. Despite being a middle schooler, Gebser joined a high school book discussion group led by Frank Waldrop, a teacher at Lago Vista's high school. During the book discussion sessions, Waldrop often made sexually suggestive comments to the students. In the fall of the same year, Gebser entered high school and was assigned to classes where Waldrop was the teacher. Waldrop continued to make inappropriate comments, and he began to direct them to Gebser, especially when the two of them were alone in the classroom. In the spring of 1992, Waldrop initiated sexual contact with Gebser when he was visiting her home, apparently delivering a book to her. After this incident, the teacher and student had sexual intercourse on a number of occasions during the school year. They often had sexual intercourse during class, though never on the school property. In the fall of 1992, parents of 2 other students complained to the principal about Waldrop's comments in class. Waldrop denied making any inappropriate comments. In January of 1993, a police officer discovered Waldrop and Gebser engaging in sexual intercourse and arrested Waldrop. The school terminated his employment and his teaching license was revoked. During this time, the district had no procedure for lodging sexual harassment complaints, nor did it have a formal anti-harassment policy. Gebser and her mother filed suit against the school and Waldrop in state court, raising claims under Title IX and negligence. Now, the school asked for a summary judgment, and it was granted due to the school's lack of knowledge of the incidents, okay? And only 1 complaint was made about the sexually suggestive comments, and the school had neither actual or constructive evidence that Waldrop was even involved in any sexual activity with another student. So, I mean, you kind of see it, but then Gebser, of course, appealed to the Title IX claim, because she was saying, okay, well, you can say that about everything else, but she's holding on to this Title IX, and she thinks she can get something off of it.
Sure.
So the Court of Appeals affirmed the lower court, claiming that Lago Vista cannot be liable based on constructive notice, finding that there was insufficient evidence to suggest that the school official should have known about this relationship. The court concluded by saying that school districts are not liable in tort for teacher-student sexual harassment under Title IX unless an employee who has been invested by the school board with supervisory power over the offending employee actually knew of the abuse or had the power to end the abuse and failed to do so.
Obviously that
so
makes sense.
Does that make any sense?
Sure. I mean, to me, if someone doesn't know about, if the school system doesn't know about this sexual harassment that's going on, they have no way in providing, the help that person needs.
Well, what it comes down to is that Gebser never told anybody about the sexual harassment. And how is the school supposed to know that this is going on if she refuses to tell anybody?
Right.
And so what do you think? Should the school be liable for this teacher, or do you think that since nobody knew, then they can't do anything about it?
Well, I'm kind of on the fence here. No one knew, but then again, no one teaches these girls or boys or whoever's being harassed to, no one explains to them that they need to go tell someone. And I'm sure being at that young of an age and being harassed by a teacher or, their classmates or a student or what have you, they need to be able to reach out to someone. They need to be able to tell someone that this is happening. And so, therefore, if she had gone to the counselor and told the counselor has to, that is her job. She has to tell a higher authority so the situation can be put to rest.
However, in other cases we've had that the counselor or whoever has failed to do so. So you're assuming.
I am assuming, yes.
But I just think that as sad as it is, schools, even as young as elementary school, they need to have some sort of way to educate young females and young males about sexual harassment and explain to them how any and everything that considers sexual harassment is wrong, and that they need to tell somebody immediately, because I mean, this whole silence is killing. I mean, that's why it's giving teachers the freedom to do more and more sexual harassment and sexual abuse, because they're more and more sure that students aren't going to do anything about it.
And they're getting away with it, obviously.
Exactly.
Since the last case we talked about, you know, the guy got rehired.
Right.
So, you know,
but
what
even
does that
in
have
this
to
case,
say?
he got away with it. I mean, he was not convicted of this crime, nor was anything done about it. And it's simply because nobody said anything. So I think the bottom line is the students have to know to tell someone. And even if it's their mother, they don't have to tell another school superintendent or supervisor. They can just go home and tell their parents what's going on, because, I mean, obviously this got out of hand.
Right, and the parents will obviously do something about it.
Exactly.
So,
well, let me talk about some of the implications that this court case had on sexual harassment today. First of all, under Title IX, females are entitled to the fundamental guarantee of equal opportunity, and that includes being free from sexual harassment. And also, schools should be held liable for the sexual harassment aided by a teacher's actual or apparent authority, that is, given that they do know about it. Because obviously, if a teacher is involved in sexual harassment and no one is told, and there's no way anybody should know about it, then the school can't be held liable for that. But I think it goes from the beginning, where you say that you need to make sure, as the principal or the board or whoever is doing the hiring of all these teachers, to make sure that they are capable and qualified teachers who don't have any type of background or what have you not.
Yes. Completely agree. So, you know, we've talked about all these cases now, and I really think that we need to talk about teacher-student relationships and how a teacher can prevent, you know, different things from happening. But let me just say that the number of teacher-student relationships are increasing greatly over these years. And when stories of sexual harassments in school first started, it was a huge deal.
I can remember back in that day.
Yes, and now, you know, in today's society, I feel like society is making it a norm. Like, it's okay. Obviously, so that teacher got rehired. There's other cases that have kind of been swept under the rug, and I don't think it's right. And so, is the public eye just accepting these acts as, well, it's just another teacher-student relationship?
And you wonder, what is the future for our children and our grandchildren and all the generations to come? I mean, I feel like it's just a slippery slope, and it's just getting worse and worse. And I would hate to see that sexual harassment really does just become something that is assumed to happen. There's nothing you can do about it. It's going to happen whether you like it or not. And that's terrible to think that all the generations ahead of us are going to be experiencing this.
Right. So obviously you expressed to us what can be done. So let's move right along here.
Alrighty. Well, I wonder, as a teacher, I mean, we've talked about some pretty extreme cases. We talked about teachers and students having sex, consensual sex, really. It wasn't even necessarily rape.
Force, right.
But there are situations that could occur that are entirely, the teachers just don't mean to sexual harass. It just comes across wrong. Sure. And I'm just wondering, what are some ways as a teacher that you can prevent accusation of falsely accused sexual harassment? Right.
Well, I mean, that's a great question, because, you know, as certified teachers go along in their undergrad and their graduate and their you know, doctorate and so forth, the professors always reiterate how important it is to stay away from accusations like that. And here's some ways to prevent that as a teacher. Obviously, have an open door policy. I would never, ever, ever have a student come into my classroom and shut the door. That is number one no-no. Obviously, there can be accusations made by that student, and the teacher has no one there to back them up, especially if you're one-on-one.
Well, and the thing about that is, if it's your word and the student's word, then 99% of the time, I feel like the student's word is going to reign over your word.
Sure.
And no matter what you say or you do, the student is going to win that case.
Right. Obviously, we also need to recognize that You are the adult in a situation, and you need to refrain from getting too close to the students. And teachers who teach younger students should use extreme caution. If you're an elementary school student and you have students coming up and giving you hugs and they come and sit on your lap, I would back away from that a little bit. It's just, with all these accusations and all these court cases occurring, I would feel a little bit nervous about that situation.
But you know what the sad thing about this is that lots of children, especially that age, they don't receive the love and the care that they really should from their home. And so going to school, like, it would be great if they could receive that at school. But now, because of all of these sexual harassment cases and because teachers have to be so careful, they can't even show, I mean, sometimes even a handshake or a pat on the back can be too far.
And it's sad. I mean, there's a gray area there, obviously, between what the teacher can do and, you know, what the teacher thinks may be wrong. I mean, obviously, I want to say sane human beings would know the difference between what is right and what is wrong. But obviously, we can definitely see that it's not always the case.
And like my mama always said, it's better safe than sorry. So
this is
I
true.
would rather not be tender loving and everything, and instead of having a court case against me, which I can't get a job anymore. So.
That's exactly right. Well, you know what? We appreciate you guys tuning in to us. And once again, I'm Megan Colts.
And I'm Bentley Sparks.
Thanks
this
so
is
much.
Court Center.
That's right.